I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sunlight filtered through my bedroom curtains, painting soft patterns on the floor, but nothing about the scene felt soft or calm to me. My sister, Emma, had always been a little controlling. Not in an obvious way, not like a parent, but in that sly, mischievous way where you never quite knew if she was joking or serious. And that morning, she had the most devilish grin plastered across her face. "Come on, it'll be fun," she said, holding out a pair of sparkling red heels. They looked tiny, delicate, and almost fragile. My first thought was, these are women's shoes, she can't be serious. But then I noticed the tiny note tucked inside the box. It read, "1 week. You wear them, no excuses." My stomach sank. I laughed nervously, thinking it was some prank. "Emma, what are you talking about? Me? Wear heels?" My voice wavered between amusement and panic. She rolled her eyes, clearly used to me underestimating her. "Yes, you. And don't even think about arguing. Mom said it's fine, she thinks it'll be good for you. Trust me, you'll thank me later." I blinked. Did she really just rope Mom into this? My mind raced. Why me? Why now? I had always been the practical one in the family, the person who kept sneakers and hoodies on rotation, avoiding anything remotely feminine. The thought of balancing on those stiletto heels made my knees weak. Before I could protest, Emma had expertly slipped one of the heels onto my foot. My first instinct was to yank it off, but she held my wrist firmly. "Relax, just feel it. Walk a little." I took a hesitant step. My toes cramped inside the narrow shoe. My ankle wobbled. My face flushed as I staggered slightly, and Emma stifled a laugh. "Okay, maybe not that graceful," she teased, tugging my arm to steady me. I caught my reflection in the mirror. For a split second, I didn't recognize myself. My feet looked impossibly small and delicate, and the shoes, so alien yet elegant, made my posture look different. There was a strange, almost thrilling sensation, like stepping into someone else's body, someone else's world. But at the same time, panic clawed at my chest. Emma clapped her hands softly. "That's it. You survived your first steps. Now do the second one." I wanted to argue, to scream, to run back to my room and hide under the blanket. But something, some mix of curiosity and fear, kept me standing there. I took a deep breath and forced myself to walk, one wobbly step after another. Each click of the heels against the wooden floor echoed like a countdown in my mind. 1 week. 1 week. 1 week. By the time I managed a shaky circle around my bedroom, I was sweating, my legs trembling, my heart hammering. Emma's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. "See? Not so bad. You'll get used to it." "Used to it?" I repeated, my voice cracking. I wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Who does she think I am? Some girl in a movie who magically rocks heels on her first try? She grinned and handed me a matching handbag. "Accessories complete the experience. Trust me, it's all about the details." I stared at the bag like it was a bomb. Inside, there was a tiny bottle of perfume, a compact, and a pair of delicate stockings. My mind screamed, I am not doing this. This is insane. But Emma was already dragging me toward the mirror again, adjusting my posture, showing me how to hold the bag, how to angle my feet, how to walk without falling. She was meticulous, almost like a drill sergeant disguised as my sister. And for reasons I couldn't quite understand, a part of me, maybe the tiniest, most forbidden part, wanted to see if I could do it. Standing there, heels clicking, stockings hugging my legs, the bag balanced in my hand, I felt a strange dichotomy, humiliation and exhilaration tangled together in a confusing knot. I didn't like feeling this way. But I did. My reflection stared back at me, and for the first time, I saw not just me, but a version of me that seemed different, daring, vulnerable, and yet somehow powerful. Emma stepped back and nodded approvingly. Good. That's the first day. Tomorrow, all day. Everywhere. No exceptions. My stomach sank. Everywhere? How could I possibly survive that? The thought of showing up at school, at work, or anywhere like this made my palms sweat. I could already imagine the stares, the whispers, the questions. And yet, beneath the dread, beneath the embarrassment, a flicker of curiosity sparked. What would it feel like to actually do this? To live even one day fully like this? I pushed the thought away immediately. I couldn't let myself think like that, not yet. Emma, sensing my hesitation, leaned in close and whispered conspiratorially, "Don't worry. I'll guide you. Every step. You might even like it." I froze. Did she really just say that? The words lingered in the air like a forbidden promise, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I hated that part of me, the part that wanted to believe her, the part that wanted to explore this strange, alien world she was dragging me into. As she finally let me go, I stumbled backward, barely catching myself on the dresser. I took one last look at my reflection, heels, stockings, handbag, and all. And in that moment, a single, terrifying thought consumed me: this is only the beginning. 1 week. 1 week in her shoes. Literally. And with that realization, I couldn't decide if I was terrified or secretly, thrillingly, curious. The next morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my calves. I had barely slept, my mind replaying every wobble, every step, every click of those cursed heels from the day before. Emma's words echoed in my ears: tomorrow, all day. Everywhere. No exceptions. My stomach churned as I realized she wasn't joking. I stared at the shoes on my floor. The heels gleamed innocently, almost mocking me. I hated them. I feared them. And yet, the thought of trying to escape felt pointless. Emma was already downstairs, humming and preparing breakfast as if nothing unusual had happened. "You'll need these," she said, sliding a fresh pair of stockings toward me. "Mom packed your lunch. And I made sure your bag matches today's outfit." I blinked. My bag? Outfit? My heart sank further. There was no room for negotiation. Resigned, I pulled on the stockings, feeling them cling uncomfortably to my legs, emphasizing every contour, every inch of my calves and thighs. I hated the sensation, and yet my reflection caught me off guard. I looked different. Slimmer, somehow more graceful. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. Walking down the stairs was an ordeal. The hardwood floors echoed with every tentative step. Emma followed closely, correcting my posture, adjusting my grip on the handbag, reminding me to walk with confidence. Confidence. Ha! I could barely keep my balance without wanting to collapse. Breakfast was awkward. Mom glanced at me with a faintly amused smile, clearly trying not to laugh. My little brother, Jake, snickered outright when I walked past. I tried to ignore him, focusing on the rhythmic torture of my ankles and calves. Every bite of toast felt like an eternity. Finally, it was time to leave for school. Emma gave me a pep talk. "Just act natural. Own it. People will notice, sure, but that's their problem. You'll be fine." I nodded weakly, hoping she was right. Stepping outside, the sun glaring down on me, I immediately felt the stares. People on the sidewalk, neighbors watering their lawns, even the mailman, all of them turned their heads to look at me. My face flushed. My stomach twisted. I wanted to vanish. Every step was a calculated effort. One misstep, and I could imagine falling flat on my face in front of a crowd of strangers. My calves screamed, my toes cramped, and every inch of me screamed, "Why are you doing this?" But Emma's words lingered, a teasing whisper in my mind: "You might even like it." At school, the real challenge began. I hadn't accounted for the relentless attention. Whispers followed me down the hallway. Did you see him, or her? Is that him? Every laugh felt directed at me, every glance a judgment. I tried to keep my head high, forcing my hips to sway naturally, forcing my feet to cooperate with these alien extensions of my body. In class, sitting was torture. Every movement reminded me of the heels, the stiffness of the stockings, the awkwardness of carrying a bag designed for someone half my size. My friends, well, those who noticed, gave awkward, curious glances. Some laughed quietly, others tried to look supportive but failed miserably. I could feel their sympathy, their curiosity, their judgment, all burning into me like invisible flames. During lunch, I attempted to navigate the cafeteria, balancing my tray, my bag, and the unsteady rhythm of my legs. One wrong step, and I nearly toppled into a table of students. I mumbled apologies, feeling the heat climb my neck. Emma's voice echoed in my head, "Own it." Easier said than done. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion set in. My feet were raw, my ankles sore, and my mind fraying at the edges. Every step felt like walking a tightrope across a chasm of embarrassment. I hated every second of it. And yet, beneath the humiliation, a strange awareness grew. People were noticing me. Maybe they were judging me, but in a way, I existed differently now. I couldn't quite explain it. The heels forced me to move, to stand taller, to occupy space differently. My posture, my gaze, my presence, it was changing, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Emma's shadow seemed to follow me everywhere. I kept imagining her grinning behind me, whispering, correcting, guiding. And I hated it. And yet, there was a part of me, tiny and guilty, that felt alive. The real test came after school. I had to walk home through the crowded streets, heels clicking against the pavement. Every step drew attention, every whisper carried through the air. My face burned. People stared, some amused, some confused, some openly judgmental. And I realized something terrifying: I couldn't run from this. The world was watching, and I was forced to exist in it, like it or not. By the time I reached home, I could barely stand. My legs shook uncontrollably, my calves throbbed, and my feet were screaming for relief. Emma greeted me at the door, eyes sparkling with mischief and triumph. "Well," she asked. "How was your first full day?" I could barely speak. I survived," I muttered, collapsing onto the couch. Emma laughed softly, patting my shoulder. "Good. That's all the first week is. Survival. Tomorrow, it gets a little more interesting." And as she left me to my aching feet, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit: my life had shifted. Suddenly, everything familiar felt strange. Every glance, every step, every interaction carried a new weight. I hated the heels. I hated how they made me feel, and yet, I couldn't ignore the tiniest spark of curiosity flickering inside me. This is going to be a long week. That evening, after Emma had finally left me alone, I collapsed onto my bed, the heels beside me like tiny symbols of torment and intrigue. I peeled them off gingerly, rubbing my sore feet, and stared at them. The shoes seemed different somehow, less threatening, almost inviting. My reflection in the mirror across the room caught my attention, and for a moment, I froze. The stockings clung to my legs, highlighting curves I hadn't noticed before. My posture, honed all day by Emma's relentless coaching, made my shoulders appear straighter, my stance more confident. I blinked and leaned closer to the mirror. Who am I looking at? The question felt dangerous, thrilling, and humiliating all at once. Curiosity won over hesitation. Tentatively, I picked up one of Emma's lip glosses and swiped it across my lips. The color shimmered in the dim light, strange and foreign on me. I bit my lip, half in embarrassment, half in fascination. The sensation was intoxicating. My reflection looked back at me, slightly altered, softer, stranger. My heart thumped in a mix of panic and excitement. I experimented further. Carefully, I applied a touch of mascara, wincing as the brush tickled my lashes. I had never realized how much difference a little change could make. My eyes seemed larger, my expression somehow more delicate, more noticeable. I caught my own gasp in the mirror. Part of me wanted to stop, to scream, to run away. But another part, the tiniest, most curious part, wanted more. I crouched down and examined my feet again. Slipping the heels back on felt like entering a different world. My legs immediately felt longer, my movements forced to adjust, deliberate. Each step across my bedroom became a small experiment in balance and grace. I wobbled, laughed, cursed under my breath, and then tried again. Maybe I could get used to this, I thought cautiously. Maybe I could even enjoy it. Then I tried the bag, slinging it over my shoulder. It felt absurd, alien, yet it completed the transformation. Every small detail, the glossy lips, the heels, the bag, added layers to a persona I didn't fully understand. I started to sway slightly, practicing walking, turning, and posing in front of the mirror. I imagined someone watching me, someone impressed by my confidence, my poise. The thought made me shiver. I caught myself imagining scenarios, walking down the street, feeling eyes on me, hearing whispers, maybe even compliments. Would I like it? Could I like it? The idea made my stomach twist with both fear and excitement. As the night deepened, I began experimenting with voice. Quietly, softly, I practiced changing the pitch, altering the rhythm of my speech. My words sounded strange, higher, lighter, almost musical. I laughed at the sound, embarrassed, and then felt a flicker of pride. I could do this. Maybe not perfectly, but I could. I even tried different hairstyles, brushing my hair into sleek styles, trying messy waves, attempting buns and ponytails. Every small experiment made me more aware of how malleable identity could be. I felt like a painter with a new palette, terrified and exhilarated at the same time. Hours passed. The room grew dark, silent except for the faint sound of my own breath and the occasional click of the heels against the wooden floor. I twirled once, then froze, staring at my reflection. This isn't me. Or is it? The question lingered, unsettling and intoxicating. I realized something. For the first time in my life, I was alone with a version of myself I'd never known. No judgment, no teasing, no expectations. Just me, and the reflection that was at once familiar and foreign. I wanted to explore it, to understand it, to feel it fully. By midnight, I had developed a routine, stockings on, heels carefully laced, bag slung over my shoulder, lips glossy, eyes subtly enhanced. I moved around the room, testing angles, practicing walking, watching myself shift subtly with each motion. I hated admitting it, but it felt empowering. And then, the most unexpected feeling washed over me, anticipation. I wanted to see what the next day would bring. I wanted to see myself out in the world like this, to test my balance, my poise, my courage. Even though fear clung to me, curiosity burned brighter. As I finally removed the heels and collapsed onto the bed, my feet aching, my muscles trembling, I realized something I couldn't ignore. A part of me had already changed. I was no longer just the practical guy who avoided anything remotely feminine. I had glimpsed a new side of myself, a side that could be daring, bold, and maybe beautiful. And in that quiet, solitary moment, I understood something profound. This week with Emma's heels was going to be far more than a challenge. It was a journey. A transformation. And I was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke with a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. My legs ached from the previous day, my calves stiff, my ankles tender, but a tiny spark of curiosity pushed me forward. Emma's voice echoed in my mind, "Own it." I slipped on the heels, stockings perfectly aligned, bag ready, lips glossed. For the first time, I didn't feel completely terrified. There was still fear, yes, but it was intertwined with something new, a cautious sense of possibility. I looked at my reflection and almost didn't recognize the person staring back. The sway of my hips, the delicate arch of my feet, even the tilt of my head, subtle, but undeniably feminine. Emma had suggested I try walking around the block before school. A small test, a warm-up. I hesitated, imagining neighbors peeking through windows, whispers trailing me down the street. And yet, stepping outside, I was forced to confront reality. The heels clicked against the pavement, echoing loudly in the early morning silence. Every step required conscious effort, toes aligned, ankles firm, posture tall. But something remarkable happened. Each movement became slightly easier. Each step, slightly more confident. I could feel my body adjusting, learning, transforming. As I rounded the corner, I noticed Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor, watering her garden. She paused, looked at me, and smiled warmly. Not judgmental, just noticing. My stomach fluttered, and for a moment, I froze, but then continued walking. No mockery, no ridicule. Just observation. And I realized, maybe the world wasn't as cruel as I had imagined. Encouraged, I ventured further. The park nearby was quiet, and I allowed myself to experiment more freely. I tried different walks, graceful sways, exaggerated steps, even a little twirl. The sunlight glinted off the heels, and I couldn't help but smile faintly. There was power in the attention, even if it was only from a few birds and stray pedestrians. Back home, Emma noticed the change immediately. "See? You're getting the hang of it," she said, her grin triumphant. I blushed, trying to hide it, but inside, a strange pride warmed me. She had pushed me into this, yes, but maybe, just maybe, I could adapt. School was still a challenge, but things felt slightly different. That morning, I experimented with small gestures, a tilt of the head, a subtle shift of the shoulders, the faint click of the heels timed with my steps. To my surprise, some people noticed, not in judgment, but curiosity. A few classmates complimented my posture, others gave polite nods, some simply stared. And instead of terror, a strange exhilaration replaced it. I was commanding attention, on my own terms. Lunchtime was still awkward, of course. Navigating the cafeteria, balancing my tray, the bag, and heels was a delicate dance. But I moved with slightly more grace, my movements deliberate. When a friend accidentally bumped into me, I barely flinched, steadying myself with a subtle twist of the wrist. I caught their eyes and smiled softly, a small, controlled expression of confidence. By midweek, small victories accumulated. I found myself experimenting further, trying different hairstyles, practicing subtle makeup, adjusting the tilt of the bag strap, even modulating my voice when talking to friends. It felt absurd and empowering at the same time. I was learning to manipulate perception, to embody a persona that was both foreign and increasingly familiar. Emma encouraged me relentlessly. "Try walking into the cafe today," she suggested one afternoon. "Order your drink. No hiding." My stomach churned, but I took the plunge. Stepping inside, I felt every eye on me. My heels clicked deliberately against the tiles. I forced my posture upright, chin slightly lifted, shoulders back. My voice trembled at first, then steadied. I ordered my coffee, smiled politely, and walked out. My hands shook slightly, but inside, a flicker of triumph ignited. That night, back in my room, I replayed the day in my mind. Each small success built confidence, confidence I hadn't known I could possess. Standing in front of the mirror, heels on, bag in hand, hair styled, makeup subtle but effective, I saw someone evolving before my eyes. I was still me, yes, but a version more daring, more visible, more alive. For the first time, I acknowledged it aloud, "I'm actually enjoying this." The words tasted strange, forbidden, exhilarating. I felt a pulse of excitement, but also guilt. I had been forced into this, pushed beyond my comfort zone, yet here I was curious, experimenting, learning to walk a tightrope between fear and empowerment. Emma peeked into my room, sensing the shift. "I knew you'd surprise yourself," she said. And for the first time, I believed her. I was no longer just surviving this week. I was exploring it, shaping it, and slowly, in tiny increments, owning it. And as I fell asleep that night, heels neatly beside the bed, a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration coursed through me. I was learning the rhythm, the balance, the power, and more importantly, I was learning to see myself in a new light. The world could stare, whisper, or judge, but inside, I was discovering a version of me I never knew existed. It was Thursday, and the week had already stretched me to my limits. My feet were sore, my calves ached, and my mind was constantly exhausted from thinking about balance, posture, and appearances. But I had also grown bolder, more aware of this strange, new version of myself. And then came the moment I had both dreaded and, in some secret corner of my mind, anticipated, the school talent show. Emma had insisted I attend, not just attend, but walk across the stage wearing the heels as part of a confidence-building exercise. My stomach twisted into knots just thinking about it. Hundreds of eyes, dozens of friends, teachers, and strangers, all scrutinizing me, every misstep amplified 1,000-fold. My hands shook as I held the bag and tried to steady my stance. "You've got this," Emma whispered, tugging gently at my wrist. "Own it. Just walk like you belong there." Belong there? I thought. I could barely survive walking down the hallway without feeling like everyone was staring. But somehow, her words sparked something in me. A mixture of fear and defiance, curiosity and determination. Maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Backstage, I could hear the murmur of the crowd, laughter, applause, and the subtle hum of excitement. My heart pounded. My heels clicked against the wooden floor as I practiced a small circle, adjusting my balance with every step. I caught my reflection in a mirror and froze for a moment. This isn't me, or is it? My reflection smiled back, confident, poised, feminine yet strong. I almost didn't recognize myself. When it was my turn, the announcer called my name. The spotlight hit, and for a moment, I wanted to vanish. My legs trembled, my mouth went dry, and my breath came in shallow gasps. But then I remembered Emma's words, and the countless hours I had spent experimenting, practicing, learning to walk, to stand, to exist in this unfamiliar yet strangely empowering identity. I took my first step onto the stage. The heels clicked against the floor, echoing in the silent auditorium. Every eye was on me, every whisper amplified. My stomach twisted violently, but I forced myself to lift my chin, to straighten my shoulders, to keep my steps deliberate. The sound of the heels became a rhythm, almost hypnotic, guiding me forward. Halfway across the stage, I faltered slightly. A gasp from the audience made my heart leap into my throat. I froze, but then something unexpected happened. I remembered the private moments in my room, the experiments with hair, makeup, voice, and posture. I had survived worse, stares, whispers, judgment. I could survive this. I could own this. I straightened, took a deep breath, and continued. The crowd seemed to blur, the whispers fading into background noise. For the first time, I felt a strange, exhilarating power in the way I moved, in the way I carried myself. I was commanding attention, not as a joke or a spectacle, but as someone discovering strength and vulnerability. When I reached the center of the stage, I paused, letting my stance sink in. The audience's murmurs faded into silence. I felt every eye on me, yet I no longer cringed. Instead, I stood tall, balancing perfectly on the heels, posture flawless, gaze steady. I had transformed panic into poise, fear into control. Emma's voice rang out softly in my memory, "You might even like it." And for the first time, I realized, I did. The sensation of commanding a space, of holding attention, of moving with confidence, was intoxicating. I had never felt so seen, so exposed, and so powerful all at once. The walk back off the stage was easier. The applause hit, and for a moment, I let myself savor it. Not just for the performance, but for surviving the week, for discovering a part of myself I never knew existed. Later, after school, friends approached me with genuine curiosity, compliments, and questions. Some were surprised, some impressed, and others simply intrigued. I smiled, realizing that the world hadn't crushed me, hadn't mocked me, at least, not completely. And even if they had, it didn't matter anymore. I had survived the ultimate test. Back at home, Emma hugged me tightly. "See? I told you, you're stronger than you think." My heart swelled with gratitude, a mix of relief, pride, and something I couldn't quite name. Confidence? Empowerment? Perhaps both. I had faced the ultimate confrontation, not just with others, but with myself, and emerged not broken, but transformed. That night, as I finally removed the heels, I stared at them with a new perspective. They were no longer symbols of torture or humiliation. They represented challenge, growth, and the strange, thrilling journey I had endured. And deep inside, I knew this was more than just a week of wearing heels. This was a lesson in resilience, self-discovery, and embracing vulnerability as a source of power. I had survived. I had transformed. And in that transformation, I had found a new version of myself, one that was not only capable but unapologetically alive. The following morning, I woke with a surprising sense of calm. My legs still ached slightly, a reminder of the week's grueling trials, but the dread that had haunted me for days was gone. The heels on the floor no longer seemed like instruments of humiliation, they had become symbols of the journey I had survived. For the first time, I looked at them with a hint of admiration. Emma peeked into my room, her mischievous grin softened by genuine pride. "Morning, superstar," she said. "How does it feel to be yourself?" I paused, considering the words. Myself. It wasn't the same person who had stumbled awkwardly on those first morning steps. This version of me was stronger, more aware, more confident. I realized that the week of challenge had done more than teach me balance and posture, it had reshaped the way I saw myself. I slipped on the heels one last time, adjusting the stockings, smoothing my hair, and swinging the bag over my shoulder. Unlike the first day, I didn't feel fear creeping up my spine. I felt empowered. The reflection in the mirror looked back at me with poise, subtle strength, and a hint of daring mischief. I smiled. As I walked through the house, every step felt deliberate, controlled. I noticed how my posture had changed, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, core engaged. The movement felt natural now, almost intuitive. I had learned to inhabit this body, this persona, with awareness and confidence. Mom peeked out of the kitchen, raising an eyebrow. "Looking different," she said, a hint of amusement and pride in her voice. "I like it." Jake, surprisingly, didn't snicker. Instead, he gave a small nod, as if acknowledging a new kind of respect. Even he could sense the transformation. By the afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, fully embracing the persona I had cultivated over the past week. The heels clicked against the pavement with a rhythm I had learned to command, not fear. People glanced, yes, but I held their gaze with quiet confidence. Whispers faded into background noise. I was no longer hiding. I was visible, aware, and in control. Emma followed at a distance, smiling proudly. "See," she said. "You're owning it. You've transformed, and not just outside. Inside too." Her words resonated deeply. I realized she was right. The journey wasn't only about shoes, stockings, or makeup, it was about confronting fear, pushing boundaries, and embracing a side of myself I had never allowed to exist. The empowerment I felt was intoxicating, affirming, and liberating. Returning home, I carefully placed the heels beside my bed. They were no longer objects of mockery or control, they were tools of self-discovery, reminders of resilience and courage. I sat in front of the mirror, taking in my reflection, and allowed myself to appreciate the journey. Every step, every wobble, every awkward stumble had led me here. Emma came in, holding a small box of chocolates. "Reward yourself," she said with a wink. "You've earned it." I laughed softly, a mix of relief and pride. The week had been challenging, embarrassing, transformative, and empowering. I realized that I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more in touch with parts of myself I had never explored. In the quiet of my room, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. Confidence wasn't something you were born with, it was built, step by step, moment by moment, often in uncomfortable and challenging situations. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was a gateway to growth. And sometimes, the most unexpected challenges could reveal the most profound strengths. I picked up the heels one last time, running my fingers over the smooth, polished leather. They had forced me to confront fear, embarrassment, and self-doubt. They had pushed me into the world in a way that terrified me and exhilarated me all at once. And now, holding them, I felt gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered to myself, a private acknowledgement of the journey. Not to Emma, not to anyone else, just to me. I had faced the challenge, embraced the transformation, and discovered a version of myself I hadn't known existed. As I stood, heels in hand, I realized that empowerment wasn't about how the world saw me. It was about how I saw myself, how I carried myself, and how I embraced both vulnerability and strength. I felt light, confident, and ready to face whatever came next, not just in these heels, but in life. And in that moment, I understood the truth: transformation isn't about forcing yourself into a mold, it's about discovering the parts of yourself that were always there, waiting to be seen, acknowledged, and embraced. Sitting on my bed that night, heels neatly placed beside me, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The week had been exhausting, exhilarating, terrifying, and empowering, all at once. I traced the smooth edges of the shoes, remembering the pain, the wobbling, the whispers, and the laughter. And yet, beneath all of that, there was growth. Transformation. Discovery. I realized that the heels had been more than just shoes, they were catalysts. They forced me to confront fear, embarrassment, and self-doubt head-on. They challenged me to exist in a space that was uncomfortable and unfamiliar, to navigate judgment and attention, and to learn how to carry myself with poise and confidence. And in doing so, they revealed a strength within me I had never known. Reflecting on the days that had passed, I understood the subtle shifts in my own perception. Where I once shrank from attention, I had begun to embrace it. Where I had feared vulnerability, I had discovered courage. Where I had doubted myself, I had begun to trust my instincts, my body, and my mind. The journey had been about far more than heels, it had been about self-discovery. I thought about Emma, of course. Without her insistence, her teasing, and her relentless push, I might never have faced these challenges. And while part of me resented the forced nature of it at first, another part of me was grateful. She had seen potential in me that I hadn't yet recognized, and she had guided me, sometimes harshly, sometimes playfully, toward it. I realized that true growth often comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the challenges we resist the most become the ones that shape us profoundly. Looking in the mirror, I took a deep breath. I saw someone who had been scared, humiliated, and unsure, and yet had emerged stronger, more confident, and more self-aware. My posture was upright, my gaze steady, and even the faintest smile hinted at newfound pride. I recognized this person. She was me, but better, braver, more complete. The lessons extended beyond the heels and stockings. I had learned about balance, not just physical, but emotional. About patience, perseverance, and the courage to face discomfort. About the power of curiosity and the importance of exploring the unknown. About the thrill that comes from stepping out of the familiar and into a version of yourself that you hadn't allowed before. I also learned that empowerment is internal. The world might notice, judge, or whisper, but true confidence comes from within. It comes from acknowledging your fears, embracing your vulnerabilities, and moving forward anyway. I had faced a world that stared and whispered, and I had discovered that the real judgment, the one that mattered most, came from myself. And I had learned to be kind to that internal voice, to encourage it, and to trust it. As I lay back against my pillows, I thought about the future. The week of heels had ended, but the lessons, the strength, and the self-awareness remained. I would face challenges differently now. I would approach discomfort with curiosity rather than fear. I would embrace vulnerability as a gateway to growth. And I would carry the confidence I had discovered into every corner of my life. The heels rested quietly on the floor, no longer symbols of torture but of triumph. And in a quiet, almost reverent way, I whispered to them, "Thank you. For the challenge, for the lessons, for revealing what I was capable of." I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The embarrassment, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had passed, leaving behind clarity, strength, and self-assurance. I had discovered a version of myself I hadn't known existed, and in doing so, I had grown in ways I couldn't have imagined. And in that stillness, I understood a simple, powerful truth: transformation isn't about changing who you are. It's about discovering who you can become when you step beyond fear, embrace vulnerability, and allow yourself to grow. It's about walking tall, in heels or out, and claiming the space you deserve. With a final deep breath, I smiled. I was me, I was stronger, and I was ready. Ready to face the world, ready to embrace whatever came next, and ready to carry the lessons of this week into every step I would take from now on. The week had ended, but my journey had only just begun. The following week, life didn't slow down. If anything, it intensified. After surviving the school talent show and embracing my newfound confidence, I thought the worst of the stares and whispers were behind me. I was wrong. Emma had insisted I continue wearing the heels and experimenting with my persona, not just at home, but everywhere. And so, Monday morning, with the sun barely peeking over the rooftops, I slipped on the heels, carefully adjusted the stockings, and pulled the bag over my shoulder. Each step outside felt deliberate and controlled, but the world seemed to have other plans. Walking down the street, I noticed a group of teens leaning against a cafe wall, clearly observing me. Their whispers were faint, but the smirks were unmistakable. I froze for a second, a flush creeping across my cheeks, but then I reminded myself, confidence isn't about hiding, it's about owning it. I practiced the graceful sway I had learned, letting each step on the heels feel deliberate. Heads turned. Some whispered, some chuckled, and a few even looked impressed. It was intoxicating and terrifying, all at once. My heartbeat quickened, but this time, there was a flicker of pride mixed with the panic. I was drawing attention, and I had learned to survive it. At school, things escalated. Some classmates were openly curious now. One of the girls in my chemistry class asked, half smiling, half teasing, "Are you serious about the heels?" I swallowed hard, feeling my lips tremble. "Yes," I whispered, my voice higher than usual. The honesty startled me as much as it seemed to impress her. "Wow," she said softly. "You're handling it better than I expected." That single sentence made my stomach flutter. Not ridicule, not laughter, just acknowledgement. I realized that some people were watching not to mock me, but to see how I would navigate this unfamiliar persona. During lunch, the cafeteria became a new battlefield. I carried my tray, balanced the heels carefully, and walked between tables. A group of boys whispered, some smirked, but others looked genuinely curious. I met one pair of eyes and smiled softly, just enough to assert presence without revealing vulnerability. The subtle gesture shifted the energy in the room. Some turned their attention away, while others gave a faint nod of recognition. I had realized that confidence could command respect, even in heels. By mid-afternoon, a more unexpected challenge appeared. The principal called me to her office. My heart sank, imagining a lecture about inappropriate dress or distractions. I stepped in, heels clicking firmly against the tiles. To my surprise, she smiled warmly. "I've noticed your confidence lately," she began, her voice calm. "It's unique, but impressive. Keep embracing yourself, just remember to stay safe and respectful of others." I blinked, stunned. Praise from authority? Not ridicule? My heart surged. This moment crystallized everything I had learned. Confidence isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity. And the world, surprisingly, could respond positively if I embodied that authenticity. After school, walking home through the crowded streets, I noticed something subtle but significant. People were staring, yes, but this time, with curiosity rather than judgment. Even strangers were giving fleeting smiles or nods. My posture, the deliberate sway of my hips, the heels clicking with rhythm, all of it commanded attention without shame. Emma appeared at the corner, as if reading my thoughts. "See," she said, her grin triumphant. "You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving." I laughed softly, a mixture of relief and disbelief. The week had started as torture, embarrassment, and forced compliance. Now, it had evolved into a learning experience, a transformation, and even a thrill. I realized I was no longer the hesitant, fearful person who had first stepped into her heels. I was someone more aware, more daring, and capable of navigating both challenge and attention. By the time I reached home, my feet ached, as always, but it was a different ache now, one of accomplishment, growth, and subtle pride. The heels rested quietly by the door, no longer objects of torment but tools of exploration and self-expression. I had survived whispers, stares, and judgment, and in doing so, had discovered an unexpected sense of power in vulnerability. As I removed them, my legs quivering slightly, I smiled to myself. This journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, curiosity, and scrutiny, but I had learned how to navigate it, how to own it, and how to transform fear into strength. The week of forced heels had become more than a challenge, it had become a lesson in courage, presence, and identity. And in that quiet moment, alone in my room, I realized the most profound change wasn't in the way others saw me, it was in the way I now saw myself. That evening, after the whirlwind of public attention and subtle victories, I found myself alone in my room, the quiet almost deafening. The heels sat neatly by my bed, stockings folded, bag resting on the chair. I sank onto the edge of the bed, exhausted yet restless. My mind wasn't focused on the aches of my feet or the physical discomfort anymore, it was on something far more complicated, me. I stared at the mirror, tracing the lines of my reflection, the subtle changes in posture, the faint glow of makeup, the way the heels had altered my walk and confidence. And then it hit me, this wasn't just about shoes, or even about experimentation. It was about identity. I had glimpsed a version of myself I hadn't allowed before, a self that was daring, visible, and confident in ways I hadn't imagined. I reached for the heels, sliding them back onto my feet, and slowly walked across the room. Each step echoed softly, and I let myself notice the rhythm, the sway, the way my body adjusted to this foreign yet exhilarating stance. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining myself in different scenarios, at school, on the street, in public spaces, navigating the world with this persona. And I realized, I didn't want to hide it anymore. The realization brought a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Do I want this? I asked myself. The answer was complicated. Part of me, the part that had spent years avoiding anything remotely feminine, felt resistance, guilt, embarrassment. But another part, the part that had survived the talent show, the whispers, the stares, and the challenges, felt undeniable curiosity, even joy. I could feel a warmth rising in my chest as I acknowledged it. Yes. I do want this. I began experimenting further, but this time not for Emma, not for anyone else, just for me. I tried different hairstyles, braiding my hair, curling it, letting it fall naturally. I experimented with subtle eye makeup, adjusting the lip gloss, noticing the impact of each choice on my reflection and how it made me feel. Each adjustment brought new layers of self-awareness, small revelations about comfort, style, and confidence. Then came the voice. I spoke softly, testing the pitch and tone, letting it rise and fall naturally. It was strange, sometimes awkward, but empowering. I felt a connection between the sound and the reflection in the mirror, between how I sounded and how I appeared. Each subtle shift in voice, posture, and expression felt like peeling back layers of a self I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I walked around, holding the bag over my shoulder, the heels clicking rhythmically, feeling the strength and balance, the the grace in movement, and the subtle thrill of self-expression. I realized that I had been hiding from this side of myself for years, not out of shame, but out of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of misunderstanding, fear of vulnerability. And now, I was no longer afraid. I sat on the floor, pulling my knees close, reflecting on the journey. I had learned that identity is fluid, complex, and deeply personal. It isn't defined by what others expect or what society dictates, it's defined by how you feel, how you explore, and how you embrace the facets of yourself that are authentic and empowering. For the first time, I whispered aloud, I like this. I like me, this version of me. The words trembled, fragile yet powerful. Saying it out loud gave it weight, made it real. I didn't just survive the week of heels, I had discovered a side of myself I had never allowed to flourish. I reached for my bag and opened it, looking at the small items Emma had encouraged me to carry, a compact mirror, lip gloss, a hairbrush, a tiny perfume sample. Each object symbolized not just experimentation, but choice, agency, and personal expression. I realized that empowerment wasn't about perfection, it was about ownership, about deciding for myself who I wanted to be in every moment. That night, I practiced walking, speaking, and expressing myself in small gestures. I twirled once in front of the mirror, laughed at myself, then stopped and smiled. I had survived the external judgments and, more importantly, the internal doubts. I had embraced vulnerability and turned it into strength. As I removed the heels and folded the stockings, I felt gratitude, not for the discomfort or embarrassment, but for the journey. The week had been challenging, but it had revealed the complexity, resilience, and courage within me. I had discovered a side of myself I hadn't known existed, and the revelation was exhilarating. Lying in bed, I realized that this was only the beginning. The heels, the makeup, the experiments, they were tools, gateways, and mirrors, reflecting not just appearance but inner strength. I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of peace and excitement for the future. I was no longer hiding. I was exploring. I was growing. And I was ready to see where this journey would take me next. The next few days brought a new kind of challenge, one that I hadn't fully anticipated. After the week of intense practice, public stares, and self-discovery, I had begun to feel confident in my movements, my posture, and my persona. Yet, confidence alone wasn't enough. I needed to see if I could sustain it in social spaces, under the gaze of people who weren't obligated to be supportive. It started on a Friday afternoon, when Emma suggested we go to the local mall. "You've got the heels, the walk, and the poise," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Now it's time to test yourself in a crowded public space. No running, no hiding. Just you." My stomach churned at the thought, but a part of me felt a flicker of excitement. I slipped on the heels, adjusted my stockings, and applied subtle makeup. Standing in front of the mirror, I took a deep breath, reminding myself that confidence came from within. This isn't about what anyone thinks, it's about how I move through the world. As we entered the mall, the crowd pressed around us. People glanced, whispered, and occasionally smiled. My heels clicked against the tiles, steady, deliberate. Emma walked beside me, giving encouraging nudges, but it was clear that I was navigating this space on my own terms. The first challenge came at the food court. A group of teenagers pointed subtly, whispering to each other. My heart leapt, but I remembered my mantra, own it. I lifted my chin, walked with purpose, and carried my tray with grace. The whispers faded as I passed, replaced by polite nods and curious glances. I felt a subtle rush, a mixture of fear and exhilaration, as I realized I was controlling the narrative. We moved to the clothing stores next. I experimented with different outfits, trying on dresses, skirts, and blouses. Each mirror reflected a new possibility, a chance to explore aspects of my persona I hadn't fully embraced. Emma hovered nearby, offering advice and teasing remarks, but I noticed I was no longer dependent on her guidance. I had internalized the lessons of the past week, and my confidence radiated quietly yet powerfully. In the cosmetics aisle, a young woman complimented my makeup, asking for tips. I felt a surge of pride as I explained subtle techniques, my voice steady, confident, and natural. The interaction was brief but meaningful. I realized that I could inspire, influence, and connect with others through this persona. The heels, the posture, the careful gestures, they were no longer tools of discomfort. They were extensions of my identity, amplifying my presence and agency in ways I had never imagined. Lunch at a cafe became another test. I balanced my bag, tray, and coffee with practiced precision, navigating narrow aisles without hesitation. A man accidentally bumped into me, apologizing, and I smiled softly, acknowledging the interaction without embarrassment. It struck me how far I had come, from trembling in fear at stairs to holding my space confidently. The world hadn't changed, I had. By evening, we wandered into a small bookstore. I ran my fingers along the shelves, trying on glasses and playful scarves. Children stared curiously, parents glanced, and strangers occasionally smiled. I realized that attention, once terrifying, could now be met with grace and even quiet enjoyment. The persona I had cultivated wasn't a mask, it was an authentic extension of myself, and I was beginning to understand how to wield it in public spaces without fear. Emma looked at me with a proud smile. "You see? You're thriving out here. Not just surviving, but shining." I laughed softly, the sound ringing with a mix of relief and pride. It wasn't just the heels, the makeup, or the outfit. It was the culmination of fear, practice, and self-discovery. I had learned to navigate social spaces with agency, authenticity, and confidence. I had transformed the external attention from a source of anxiety into an affirmation of my inner strength. Walking back home, the evening air cool against my skin, I reflected on the lessons of the day. Confidence wasn't about perfection, it was about awareness. Presence wasn't about hiding, it was about embracing every aspect of yourself, even those you once feared. And identity wasn't a static concept, it was fluid, evolving, and, above all, deeply personal. By the time I reached my room, my heels clicked against the floor with a steady rhythm that had become second nature. I removed them carefully, feeling a subtle ache in my calves, but also a profound sense of accomplishment. Today, I had navigated public spaces, social scrutiny, and attention with a poise I hadn't thought possible just a week ago. As I sat quietly, reflecting, I realized something important. Empowerment isn't just about private practice or controlled environments. It's about stepping into the world, fully visible, and claiming space for yourself with confidence, grace, and authenticity. The heels had guided me to this understanding, but it was my courage, curiosity, and determination that had carried me here. I smiled softly, a warm, quiet pride settling in my chest. The week of challenges had become a journey, not only of external transformation but of internal growth. And for the first time, I felt fully capable of navigating the world as this version of myself, strong, confident, and unapologetically visible. Even as I grew more confident in public, there were quiet moments when doubts crept back in. Late at night, when the world was silent and the mirror reflected only me, I sometimes wondered if all this, the heels, the makeup, the persona, was just temporary. Was I truly embracing myself, or was I performing a role Emma had forced me into? That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, heels off, stockings folded, and let the silence settle. My reflection in the mirror was calm, poised, and confident, but beneath it, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Who am I really? I whispered to myself. Am I this confident, graceful person, or am I just pretending? The question gnawed at me, and for a moment, I almost wanted to abandon it all. Toss the heels in the corner, wipe off the makeup, and retreat to my old, comfortable self, the self who didn't draw attention, who stayed invisible, who didn't risk judgment. But then I thought back to the week, the talent show, the mall, the compliments, the small victories. I remembered the first faltering steps, the stumbles, the laughter, and the whispered encouragements from Emma. Each memory carried weight, a quiet testament to growth and resilience. I realized something profound. growth isn't linear, and confidence isn't constant. It's natural to doubt yourself, especially when exploring new facets of identity. But courage isn't the absence of doubt, it's moving forward despite it. I decided to test this realization. Standing in front of the mirror, I put on the heels again, slowly, deliberately. I adjusted the stockings, brushed my hair, and applied subtle makeup. Each action was deliberate, a ritual of self-affirmation. And then, I walked. At first, the steps were shaky. My mind whispered doubts. What if someone sees you? What if you stumble? What if this isn't you? But I focused on the rhythm of my movement, the sway of my hips, the lift of my chin. Slowly, step by step, the doubts began to dissolve. I wasn't pretending, I was exploring, learning, and embracing a part of myself I had never acknowledged before. I experimented further, speaking softly to myself, testing the voice I had developed. The sound was strange, unfamiliar, but it resonated with authenticity. I realized that I wasn't merely copying Emma's vision or performing for anyone else. I was discovering my own identity, my own strength, my own voice. As the minutes passed, I walked with more assurance, turning once to face the mirror fully. The reflection staring back at me wasn't someone forced into shoes or persona, it was me, evolving, learning, and embracing complexity. The fear that had once crippled me now existed only as a quiet whisper, easily overshadowed by pride and self-recognition. I took a deep breath, feeling the ache in my calves and the steady pulse of adrenaline. Doubts still lingered, yes, but they were no longer overwhelming. They were reminders of growth, markers of challenge, and opportunities for resilience. I smiled, realizing that facing fear and self-doubt didn't diminish confidence, it reinforced it. Later that evening, I shared a quiet moment with Emma. I still feel nervous sometimes, I admitted, tracing the outlines of the heels with my fingers. Even after all this. Emma smiled knowingly. Good, she said. It means you're growing. Confidence without challenge isn't real. The doubts remind you that you're human, and that you're stronger than you think. Her words resonated deeply. I understood that the journey wasn't about eliminating fear or doubt, it was about learning to move through them, to acknowledge them, and to keep stepping forward. By the end of the night, I sat quietly, heels off, reflecting on the transformation. The week had begun as a test of endurance, balance, and obedience. It had evolved into a profound journey of self-discovery, confidence, and empowerment. And now, I knew that even when fear or doubt surfaced, I had the strength to confront it, to move through it, and to emerge stronger on the other side. I whispered softly to myself, a quiet affirmation, I am me. I am growing. I am strong. And for the first time, the words felt wholly true, unshakable, and empowering. The sun filtered gently through my bedroom window, casting a warm glow across the room. I sat on the edge of my bed, heels neatly placed beside me, stockings folded with care. The week had ended, but the journey I had embarked on was far from over. What started as a challenge, a playful dare from Emma, had transformed into a profound exploration of self, identity, and empowerment. I thought back to the first day, the nervous, shaky steps in the heels, the flushed embarrassment, the trembling hands adjusting stockings. The fear and self-consciousness that had once dominated every step now felt like distant memories. They were reminders of growth, markers of a journey that had shaped me into someone more aware, confident, and resilient. Emma had been there the entire time, guiding, teasing, pushing, but ultimately giving me the space to discover myself. I realized that her role had been essential, not to control, but to catalyze. She had forced me to confront fear, embarrassment, and vulnerability, and in doing so, had helped me uncover a strength I hadn't known existed. I felt gratitude toward her, a recognition that growth often comes from unexpected places, and sometimes from those who challenge us the most. I picked up the heels, running my fingers along their smooth surfaces. They no longer represented humiliation or challenge, they symbolized courage, discovery, and transformation. They were tools that had guided me through fear into confidence, discomfort into grace, and uncertainty into self-awareness. Standing in front of the mirror, I observed the reflection of someone entirely familiar and yet profoundly changed. My posture was strong, my gaze steady, my movements deliberate. The reflection staring back at me wasn't just a product of the week's lessons, it was the embodiment of growth, choice, and self-acceptance. I smiled softly, acknowledging both the journey and the person I had become. I thought about the world beyond my room, the classmates, strangers, and friends who had observed, whispered, or stared. Each interaction had been a test, a challenge, a lesson. And each one had contributed to the transformation of my confidence. I had learned that empowerment doesn't come from hiding, avoiding, or conforming, it comes from embracing yourself fully, unapologetically, and with awareness. As I prepared for the day, I carefully put on the heels one last time, adjusted the stockings, and applied subtle makeup. I walked through my home, each step deliberate, steady, and confident. I noticed the familiar rhythm in my movements, the sway that had once felt awkward, now natural. I felt grounded in my body, in my identity, and in the choices I had made to explore and embrace this version of myself. Emma appeared at the doorway, her grin as wide as ever. "Ready?" she asked. "It's time to take this confidence out into the world, for real." I nodded, a quiet smile on my lips. "I'm ready." Walking out into the sunlight, I felt the familiar click of the heels against the pavement, a rhythm that now represented courage, presence, and self-assurance. People glanced, whispered, and sometimes smiled. But for the first time, none of it mattered. I wasn't moving through the world for validation, amusement, or acceptance. I was moving for me, for my growth, my identity, and my empowerment. The journey ahead was still uncertain. There would be challenges, scrutiny, and moments of doubt. But I knew now that I had the tools, resilience, and awareness to navigate them. Confidence wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. Empowerment wasn't about hiding fear, it was about moving through it. And identity wasn't a fixed construct, it was fluid, evolving, and profoundly personal. I looked at the heels in my bag, and for a moment, I whispered a quiet thank you. Thank you for the lessons, for the growth, for the courage they forced me to discover. They had been more than shoes, they had been gateways, mirrors, and catalysts. As I stepped forward, Emma by my side, I felt a sense of liberation. The world could stare, whisper, or judge, but it didn't matter. I had discovered a part of myself that was strong, daring, and authentic. I had transformed not just in appearance, but in confidence, identity, and presence. The week had ended, but my journey had only just begun. Each step, each interaction, and each choice would now be guided by the lessons I had learned, the courage to embrace vulnerability, the strength to face fear, and the wisdom to navigate the world with authenticity. And in that quiet, sunlit moment, I smiled, fully aware and fully present. I was me, unapologetically, confidently, and beautifully. The heels clicked softly as I walked forward, not as a challenge, but as a celebration of transformation, empowerment, and self-discovery. The world awaited, and I was ready.